Hey guys, it's Fan94 here today, and I hope you're all having an absolute wonderful day. And the video today is actually a follow-up to my experience with Bigfoot. And in that video, I had explained that my grandfather had an experience, and I had a couple of you in the comments want me to make a follow-up video on what he had experienced. So sit back, relax, and let's get right to it. So one evening when my grandfather was going to see my grandmother, he was walking through the trail that he always went, and he started getting an eerie feeling that he was being watched. And you have to remember that this was in rural Virginia, so there was plenty of woods around, and there was plenty of dirt roads to roam. You know, a lot of people didn't use these roads either. So as he was walking to my grandmother's house, which he did multiple times before, he started getting an eerie feeling that he was being watched. You know, whenever you get into the woods or anything like that, sometimes you get that feeling. So he kept on walking, you know, trying not to freak himself out because, you know, he was by himself. He didn't have a weapon or anything like that. And, you know, this was back in the day where crime wasn't very high or anything like that. So, you know, he wasn't really worried about that. So he made his way to my grandmother's house, and as he approached the steps and walked up on the steps, my grandmother pointed behind him and said, "What is that at the tree lines?" And as my grandfather turned around and looked, sure enough, there was a 8 or 9 foot tall, hairy looking humanoid that was standing at the tree line staring at him and my grandmother. As they both stood on the front porch and looked at him and looked at each other in disbelief, you know, they came to the conclusion that, okay, this is not a bear, this is nothing that we've ever seen, but we have heard people around these areas come in contact with something like this. So therefore, they believed it to be a Bigfoot. So without hesitation, you know, they went back inside and they locked the doors and they looked out the window. And as they was looking out the window, they started watching this thing from the tree line come out, dart left, and start walking up to the property line. As this was happening, my grandfather went up to my great grandfather, which was my grandmother's father, and asked him to take a look outside. And as he did, he saw the same thing that they had saw. So with that being said, my grandfather and my great-grandfather decided to get some rifles and go out on the front porch because they didn't know if this thing was a threat or not. And as my grandfather and my great-grandfather went outside, they watched this thing walking up on the property line. And they looked to one another and, you know, they said, should we yell at this thing? Should we shoot at this thing? What should we do? So my great-grandfather decided to yell at this thing. And as my grandfather said, he sure wished that he wouldn't have done that because this thing responded with a awful blood-curdling scream. So without any hesitation, it scared them shitless, so they went back inside and shut the doors and locked them. As they were sitting inside, they heard this thing come around the house from the front to the back and come back around, and it let out this blood-curdling scream again. And my great-grandfather had a couple of hunting dogs. He let 3 of them out the back door to go after and confront this thing, whatever it was. And you could hear them running this thing back down through the valley and could hear them barking and, you know, just absolutely gnawing and gnashing and everything like that until they didn't hear it no more. So they made the decision that they wasn't going to go out for the rest of the night, and they decided to all stay up all night and wait till the next morning to go out and investigate. Well, the next day comes around, and my grandfather and my great-grandfather worked up enough courage to get the rifles and go back outside and went down to the property line and the tree lines, and sure enough, they discovered these massive footprints of where this thing had been walking around. And the scary thing about it was the dogs never came back. So it led to my grandfather and my great-grandfather believing that whatever this thing was pretty much killed all three of them. And you know, that was a very important thing to my great-grandfather because he was an avid hunter and he needed those dogs. So they went back home and they explained what they had seen to my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And you know, that was basically it at that point. Until my great-grandfather a couple days later went down to the farmer's market. That's what we kind of call them around here, like smaller little markets where farmers can sell their crops and everything. And explained to a couple of his friends what he had saw. And to his disbelief, one of them spoke up and said, you know, I had the similar experience to what you had. And he didn't really explain to me what that experience was that his friend had, because you got to remember that was my great-grandfather that was talking to one of his friends. It wasn't my grandfather. So, you know, it's happened to many people around this area. And there's a lot of people that try to disprove it. There's a lot of people that's out there and says, hey, you know, yeah, I've had these experiences. And, you know, I guess what we can take away from this is don't ever shoot somebody's story down and call it bullshit or anything like that, because you wasn't there. You didn't know what happened. And we never know, and we never will know what all is out there. So, you know, keep your eyes open and do not be afraid if you have had an experience to share it with me, to share it with Facebook groups, to share it with people that has had experiences. But that is it. That is it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to start talking to more people that's had experiences. I really want to get this channel to the point where we can share these experiences with one another, and I can share your stories, or I can share people's stories with you guys. So I hope you have an absolute wonderful day. And as always, I'm CryptidFan94. God bless and take care.